I spent 42 years teaching mathematics to teenagers who couldn't have cared less about polynomials. And in all that time, I never once stopped to ask myself what I actually wanted. My name is Eleanor. I'm 73 years old, and I'm finally beginning to understand that the biggest mistakes we make aren't the dramatic ones we agonize over. They're the quiet compromises we make every single day without even noticing. When I was younger, I thought life was something that happened in big moments. The wedding day, the birth of a child, the promotion, the move to a new city. I waited for those moments like they were going to tell me who I was supposed to be. But here's what nobody tells you when you're young and still believe that everything important is yet to come. Life doesn't happen in those big moments at all. It happens in the 1,000 tiny decisions you make on a Tuesday afternoon when you're tired, and it's easier to say yes than to figure out what you really want. The first mistake I made, though I didn't know it was a mistake for decades, was waiting for permission to live the life I wanted. I don't mean permission from other people exactly, though there was some of that too. I mean, I was waiting for some external sign that it was okay to want things for myself. I married Robert when I was 24 because that's what you did. He was a good man, steady and reliable, and I convinced myself that the absence of excitement was the same thing as maturity. We had 2 children, bought a house in the suburbs with a mortgage that felt like a prison sentence, and I taught algebra to kids who spent the entire class period passing notes and watching the clock. For years, I told myself I was content. Content is such a careful word, isn't it? It's what you say when you're not quite happy, but you don't want to seem ungrateful. I had everything I was supposed to want: a husband who came home every night, children who were healthy, a job with benefits and summers off. Who was I to want more? There were women who had real problems, women whose husbands hit them or drank away the grocery money, women who couldn't have children or who lost them too soon. My discontent felt selfish, so I buried it under layers of responsibility and routine until I almost forgot it was there. The second mistake was believing that other people's expectations were more important than my own quiet knowing. My mother always said that a woman's job was to make a home, and even though I had a career, even though it was 1975 and women were supposed to be liberated, some part of me still believed her. So when I wanted to go back to school for my doctorate, when I fantasized about research and publishing papers, and maybe teaching at a university instead of a high school, I told myself it was impractical. Robert needed me to be home for dinner. The kids needed a mother who wasn't always buried in books. The mortgage needed to be paid, and my salary was dependable. What I didn't see then was that every time I chose what was practical over what called to me, I was making myself smaller. I was teaching my daughter that women should be sensible first and happy second, if there's time left over. I was teaching my son that his mother's dreams were less important than his father's comfort. And I was teaching myself that the voice inside me that said, "But what about what you want?" was something to be ashamed of and ignored. Robert died when I was 61. Heart attack on a Saturday morning while he was mowing the lawn. 1 minute he was complaining about the neighbor's tree dropping leaves in our yard, and the next minute he was gone. Everyone told me how lucky I was that he didn't suffer, and they were right. But what I couldn't tell anyone was that mixed in with the grief was something else I didn't have a name for. It felt like space opening up. Like suddenly I could breathe deeper than I had in 37 years. The third mistake, and this one nearly broke me, was thinking that at 61 I was too old to start over. The grief counselor I saw for exactly 3 sessions before I decided she was too young to understand anything important told me I needed to find a new normal. Build a life that honored Robert's memory, but allowed me to move forward. What she meant was, I should join a book club and maybe volunteer at the hospital and learn to be a cheerful widow who baked cookies for her grandchildren and didn't make anyone uncomfortable by being too sad or, God forbid, too happy. Instead, I sold the house. My kids thought I'd lost my mind. My daughter Sarah actually used the phrase early dementia in a phone call she thought I couldn't hear. But I sold that house with its 30 years of memories and mortgage payments, and I bought a small apartment near the university, and I enrolled in the doctoral program I'd dreamed about 4 decades earlier. My advisor was young enough to be my son. My classmates were mostly in their 20s and 30s, and at first they looked at me like I was someone's confused grandmother who had wandered into the wrong building. The 4th mistake is one I see everywhere now, in the faces of people my age and younger. Treating time like it's infinite when you know perfectly well it isn't. We all know we're going to die. We've been to enough funerals, sat beside enough hospital beds, but somehow we still act like there will always be another year, another month, another someday when we'll finally do the thing we keep putting off. I wasted 40 years on someday. Someday I'll travel. Someday I'll take painting classes. Someday I'll tell Robert that I'm lonely, even though he's right there across the table every night. My dissertation was on women mathematicians who were written out of history, whose work was attributed to male colleagues or husbands, whose brilliance was buried under centuries of deliberate forgetting. I spent 3 years tracking down archives and dusty letters and marginalia in old textbooks. I cried in libraries. I felt rage I didn't know I was carrying. And I felt more alive than I had since I was a girl who loved numbers, because they were beautiful and certain and didn't care whether you were pretty or charming or good at making yourself small. The 5th mistake was caring so much about what people thought that I forgot to notice what I thought. When my son asked me why I was doing this to the family, as if getting a doctorate at 63 was some kind of betrayal, I almost quit. I almost let his embarrassment become my shame. But then I thought about all the times I had swallowed my words to keep the peace, all the opinions I never voiced, all the desires I never named, and something in me just refused. I was done shrinking. I was done apologizing for taking up space. The 6th mistake, and maybe this is the one that cost me the most, was not understanding that love without honesty is just a long, slow disappearance. Robert and I were married for 37 years, and we were kind to each other, and we never fought about anything important, and I'm not sure we ever really knew each other at all. I didn't tell him about the dreams I'd given up. He didn't tell me about whatever he'd given up. I assume he must have given up something, though I never asked. We were so busy being appropriate and responsible that we forgot to be real. I have a friend now, Margaret, who I met in the doctoral program. She's 76 and working on a dissertation about medieval astronomy, and last month she told me she's in love with one of the other graduate students, a woman named Chen who's 49. Margaret's grown children aren't speaking to her. Her church asked her not to come back. She lost half her friends in a single month. And when she told me about it, sitting in my apartment with tea going cold in our cups, her eyes were bright and her hands were steady, and she said, "Eleanor, I spent 75 years being who everyone else needed me to be. I have maybe 10 years left if I'm lucky. I'm not spending them lying anymore." The 7th mistake is the one I'm trying not to make now, believing it's too late to be honest, too late to change, too late to want things and reach for them and fail spectacularly and try again. Every day I wake up in my small apartment with my books piled on every surface and my dissertation notes covering the kitchen table, and some part of me still can't quite believe I'm allowed to be this happy. That happiness isn't something you have to earn through decades of sacrifice and self-denial. That it's okay to be 73 and still becoming who you are. I defended my dissertation 8 months ago. Dr. Eleanor Chen now. I took my mother's maiden name because after all these years of being Mrs. Robert Patterson, I wanted a name that was just mine. I'm teaching one seminar at the university, and I'm writing a book about the women in my research, and last week a journal accepted my first academic article in 45 years. My daughter still thinks I've lost my mind, but my son came to my defense, and afterward he said, "Mom, I never knew you were so brave." I told him I wasn't brave. I was just finally tired enough of being afraid. Here's what I wish I could tell my younger self, the 24-year-old bride who thought she had forever to figure out what she wanted. You don't have forever. You have right now, this moment, this one precious, unrepeatable life. And every day you spend being who other people need you to be instead of who you actually are is a day you're never getting back. That doesn't mean you abandon your responsibilities or hurt the people who love you. But it means you stop treating your own desires like they're somehow less legitimate than everyone else's comfort. It means you ask for what you want. It means you notice when you're making yourself small and you stop doing it. It means you understand that the people who really love you want you to be whole and real, not convenient and quiet. And the people who only love you when you're convenient and quiet don't actually love you at all. They love the service you provide. I'm 73 years old, and I'm just beginning to understand that it's never too late to tell the truth. Never too late to choose yourself. Never too late to be brave enough to want something and foolish enough to believe you might actually get it. I've wasted so much time, decades of it, but I'm not wasting any more, and neither should you. The mistakes I made aren't special or unique. You're probably making some version of them right now. Waiting for permission that's never coming. Shrinking yourself to fit into spaces that were never meant to hold you. Putting off the things that matter because there's always tomorrow until suddenly there isn't. I can't give you back the time I lost, and I can't give you back yours. But I can tell you this, whatever you're waiting for, whatever you think you're too old or too young or too late to do, you're wrong. You're not too anything. You're exactly the right age to start living like you mean it. My mother died never having traveled outside of Pennsylvania, even though she talked about seeing Paris her whole life. My father died without ever telling my mother he'd wanted to be an artist instead of an accountant. Robert died thinking he'd done everything right, and maybe he had, by his own measure. But I'm not dying like that. I'm not going quietly into old age pretending I don't want anything, pretending I'm satisfied with half a life. I'm too old now to care what people think, which turns out to be one of the great freedoms of aging. I can be ridiculous. I can fall in love if I want to. I can change my mind about everything I thought I knew. I can spend the last chapter of my life finally telling the truth. And if that makes people uncomfortable, well, their comfort was never my responsibility in the first place. So here's what I want you to hear. Your life is shorter than you think it is, and more precious, and more completely yours than you've been taught to believe. Don't wait for someone to give you permission to want things. Don't make yourself small because it's easier than taking up space. Don't spend 40 years on someday. Don't love people from behind a wall of politeness and call it intimacy. Don't believe anyone who tells you it's too late. I'm 73 years old, and I'm finally becoming myself. And it turns out that's the only thing I was ever supposed to do. The rest of it, the house, the mortgage, the respectability, the careful compromises, none of that matters nearly as much as I thought it did. What matters is this: I'm here. I'm real. I'm exactly who I am, and I'm not apologizing for it anymore. And neither should you.